our party and love my country here.
Record close. The S&P had 27. The Nasdaq was up 51. The latest Fox News poll out tonight has former President Donald Trump with a 2-point advantage nationally over Vice President Harris among likely voters. That flips the Democrats' 2-point edge in September. Now, to my exclusive interview with Vice President Harris. Madam Vice President, thank you for the time.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, Bret.
You know, voters tell pollsters all over the country and here in Pennsylvania that immigration is one of the key issues that they're looking at this election, and specifically the influx of illegal immigrants from more than 150.
You know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you
now,
just a number? Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Bret, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have
it's a rough estimate of 6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question. I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
And when you came into office, your administration immediately reversed a number of Trump border policies. Most significantly, the policy that required illegal immigrants to be detained through deportation, either in the U.S. or in Mexico. And you switched that policy. They were released from custody awaiting trial. So instead, included in those were a large number of single men, adult men, who went on to commit heinous crimes. So, looking back, do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico at the beginning of your administration?
At the beginning of our administration, within practically hours of taking the oath, the first bill that we offered Congress, before we worked on infrastructure, before the Inflation Reduction Act, before the Chips and Science Act, before the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to citizenship for the...
Yes, ma'am. May I finish responding, please? But you have to let me finish,
You
please.
had the White House and the House and the Senate, and they didn't bring up that bill.
Responding to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to citizenship for the...
May I please finish? The priority for us as a nation and for the American people. And our focus has been on fixing a problem. And from day one then, and I'd like to finish.
Yes, ma'am.
We recognized from day one that, to the point of this being your first question, it is a priority for us as a nation and for the American people. And our focus has been on fixing a problem. And from day one then, we have done a number of things, including to address our asylum system and put more resources, getting more judges, what we needed to do to tighten up penalties and increase penalties for illegal crossings, what we needed to do to deal with points of entry border, which is why I believe the Border Patrol agents supported the bill. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States, which is a scourge affecting people of every background, every geographic location in our country, killing people. It would have allowed us to put more resources into prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, which I have done.
Yes, ma'am.
Border, which is why I believe the Border Patrol agents supported the bill. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States, which is a scourge affecting people of every background, every geographic location in our country, killing people. It would have allowed us to put more resources into prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, which I have done.
Yes, ma'am.
This is rightly a discussion that the American people want to have. And what they want are solutions, and they want a president of the United States.
Democrats voted against that bill.
Learned about that bill and told them to kill it because he preferred to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And in this election, this is rightly a discussion that the American people want to have. And what they want are solutions, and they want a president of the United States.
Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday, campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Bret,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There is no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months. The pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur. And this election in 20 days will determine whether we have a president of the United States who actually cares more about fixing a problem, even if it is not to their political advantage in an election, because there was a solution, Bret.
Madam Vice President, it was a policy decision in the early part of your administration. I will let one of the mothers talk about it. Take a listen.
Because of the Biden-Harris administration open border policies catch and release, they were enrolled in the Alternatives to Detention program. This meant that they were released into the United States. It was not even a full 3 weeks later that they would take my daughter, Jocelyn Nungare's life. I believe the Biden-Harris administration open border policies are responsible for the death of my daughter.
That's the early days. So do you owe them an apology is what I'm saying.
I will tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I am so sorry for her loss. Sincerely. But let's talk about what is happening right now with an individual who does not want to participate in solutions. Let's talk about that as well.
But do you want to answer
in all fairness, I told you, I feel in saying that this is a perfect immigration system. I've been clear, I think we all are, that it needs to be fixed. We need more. I was just down at the border talking with border agents, and they will tell you, and I'm sure you probably, I know you investigate and you are a serious journalist. They will tell you, we need more judges. We need to process those cases faster. We need the support for those cases that should be prosecuted. They need more resources, and Congress ultimately is the only place that that's going to get fixed, Bret. Well, that's how this system works.
That's the premise of this question. There were 90-plus executive orders that were rescinded in the first days. Many of those were Trump border policies. I'm not going to stay here because there's other things to talk about, but you frequently talk to the Border Patrol Union for support of that bipartisan bill, and they did. They supported it. But they also just endorsed Donald Trump and said, you've been, quote, a failure with border security. Why do you think they said that?
I think they're frustrated, and I get it. They want support. They want support, and that's what that border security bill would have done. These guys at the border, these men and women, they're working hard. They're working around the clock. I get it.
There's a lot of people that look back at what you said in 2019 when you first ran for president. And there have been changes, and you've talked about some of them. When it comes to immigration, you supported allowing immigrants in the country illegally to apply for driver's license, to qualify for free tuition at universities, to be enrolled in free health care. Do you still support those things?
Listen, that was 5 years ago, and I'm very clear that I will follow the law. I have made that statement over and over again, and as Vice President of the United States, that's exactly what I've done, not to mention before.
If that's the case, you chose a running mate, Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, who signed those very things into state law. So do you support that?
We are very clear, and I am very clear, as is Tim Walz, that we must support and enforce federal law, and that is exactly what we will do.
So decriminalizing border crossings, like you said in 2019.
I do not believe in decriminalizing border crossings, and I've not done that as Vice President. I will not do that as President.
So these are evolutions that you've had.
But let's be very clear. I'm the only person who's running for president who has, and that is exactly what we will do.
So decriminalizing border crossings, like you said in 2019.
I do not believe in decriminalizing border crossings, and I've not done that as Vice President. I will not do that as President.
So these are evolutions that you've had.
But let's be very clear. I'm the only person who's running for president who has people and cross our border with the intent of doing us harm and cross our border illegally, and I will do that work as Vice President. I take that in guns, drugs, and human beings. I have spent a significant part of my career going after people who present a threat to the safety of the American people and cross our border with the intent of doing us harm and cross our border illegally, and I will do that work as Vice President. I take that work quite seriously.
This is a time when voters, especially here in Pennsylvania, are inundated with commercials and ads. They just want it to stop because it's every commercial. But many of them add noise, but a few of them seem to break through. This particular one from the Trump campaign has gotten a lot of attention.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
So are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system. And I think, frankly, that ad from the Trump campaign is a little bit of like throwing, stones when you're living in a glass house.
The Trump aides say that he never advocated for that prison policy and no gender transition surgeries happened during his presidency.
Well, you know what, you got to take responsible for what happened in your administration.
Yeah, no surgeries happened in this presidency.
It's in black and white.
Would you still advocate for using taxpayer dollars for gender reassessment surgeries?
I will follow the law, just as I think Donald Trump would say he did.
You would have a say as president.
Like I said, I think he spent $20 million on those ads, trying to create a sense of fear in the voters because he actually has no plan in this election that is about focusing on the needs of the American people. Whereas, at $20 million on that ad, on an issue that, as it relates to the biggest issues that affect the American people, it's really quite remote. And again, his policy was no different. Look at where we are, though.
They say
on plans for the American people, I'm offering a plan to deal with affordable housing. I'm offering a plan to deal with what we need to do to strengthen small businesses, which are the backbone of America's economy. I am offering a plan that is about taking care of young parents and giving them the support they need. My plans for the economy will strengthen the economy, as have been reviewed by 16 Nobel laureates, Goldman Sachs, Moody's, and recently the Wall Street Journal, which have all studied our plans and have indicated my plans for our economy would strengthen our economy, his would make them weaker, would ignite inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year. Those are the facts.
Why do you think more people say they trust him on the economy than they trust you?
I think that when you look at an analysis of our plans for what we would do as President of the United States, it has been clear to those who study and understand how economic policy works, that moving forward, exactly that his plan would be again to give tax cuts to billionaires and the biggest corporations in our country and blow up our deficit.
It's interesting you said turn the page, Madam Vice President. You were asked on 2 different shows last week what, if anything, you would do differently than President Biden. Here's what you said.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden?
Exactly that his plan would be again to give tax cuts to billionaires and the biggest corporations in our country and blow up our deficit.
It's interesting you said turn the page, Madam Vice President. You were asked on 2 different shows last week what, if anything, you would do differently than President Biden. Here's what you said.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden?
I noticed.
And so that would be one change in terms of. But also, I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump.
So you're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences. I'm not Donald Trump.
So you're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership. I, for example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me minutes ago, and the business sector, and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make about, for example, my plan for increasing the supply of housing in America and bringing down the cost of housing, addressing the issue of small businesses, which is about working with the private sector to bring more capital and access to capital to our small business leaders, including my plan for a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and for small businesses, extending the tax deduction from $5,000 to $50,000.
We've heard a lot about those plans in recent days. Your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years, so what are you turning the page from?
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade in which we've been burdened with the kind of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump that has been designed and implemented to divide our country and have Americans literally point fingers at each other. Rhetoric and an approach to leadership that suggests that the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down instead of what we all know. The strength of leadership is based on who you lift up. The strength of an American president, which is one who understands that the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us.
Madam Vice President, more than 70% of people
that is about turning the
pollsters,
page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Bret.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam Vice President.
You and I both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade, people have become. But listen, over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me, the former chief of staff to the president, Donald Trump, former defense secretaries, national security advisor, and his vice president, one, that he is unfit to serve, that he is unstable, that he is dangerous, and that people are exhausted with someone who professes to be a leader who spends full time demeaning and engaging in personal grievances and it being about him instead of the American people. People are tired of that.
If that's the case, why is half the country supporting him? Why is he beating you in a lot of swing states? Why, if he's as bad as you say, that half of this country is now supporting this person who could be the 47th president of the United States? Why is that happening?
This is an election for President of the United States. It's not supposed to be easy.
I know, but
It's not supposed to be. It is not supposed to be a cakewalk for anyone.
So are they misguided, the 50%?
Listen,
are they stupid? What is
God,
it?
I would never say that about the American people. And in fact, if you listen to Donald Trump, if you watch any of his rallies, he's the one who tends to demean and belittle and diminish.
Responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Bret, I'm
responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations.
People, that's not what you just showed.
Well, he was asked about that
No,
specific...
that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you,
that was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. Sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
Well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you,
that was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it. And this is what is at stake, which is why you have someone like the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying what Mark Milley has said about Donald Trump being a threat to the United States of America.
He's quoted in the Bob Woodward book that way, yes. Let me ask you this, Madam Vice President. You call Donald Trump...
The significance of that.
You call Donald Trump... he's misguided. You say now he's unstable.
He is unstable, Bret.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room. And he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Bret, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
But you talked about it.
And Donald Trump
after George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump, which is why the people who know him best, including leaders of our national security community, have all spoken out. Even people who worked for him in the Oval Office, worked with him in the Situation Room, and have said he is unfit and dangerous and should never be president of the United States again, including his former vice president, which is why the job was open for him to choose another running mate. So that is a fact. That is a fact.
Madam Vice President, two more things. You were asked on 60 Minutes about the biggest threat that the world faces, that the U.S. faces. This is what you said.
Which foreign country do you consider to be our greatest adversary?
I think there's an obvious one in mind, which is Iran. Iran has American blood on their hands, okay? This attack on Israel, 200 ballistic missiles. What we need to do to ensure that Iran never achieves the ability to be a nuclear power, that is one of my highest priorities.
A number of experts thought you would say China. The FBI director had said that. But you said Iran. If that's the case, what do you say to critics who look at the actions of your administration and say you're not acting like Iran is the #1 threat?
Well, I will tell you most recently, whether it was in April or in October, and then several hours on each occasion, that Iran posed a threat to Israel. I was there, most recently in the Situation Room, in the most recent attack, working with the heads of our military and doing what America must always do to defend and to support Israel in its requirement to defend itself, and to give American support to be able to allow Israel to have the resources to defend itself against attack, including from Iran and Iran's terrorist proxies in the region.
Right.
And that
but those
is,
proxies were getting funded by
my
Iran.
commitment to that is unyielding and unwavering.
Critics just say that you either relaxed or failed to enforce sanctions on Iran, allowing all of this money to flow into Iran, like billions.
Let's go back to Donald Trump, who pulled out of a deal that would have actually put Iran in check.
The estimates in billions.
It was during Donald Trump's
that
administration
go towards
that
the Iran regime,
that we had an American military base that was attacked, where American soldiers suffered traumatic brain injuries, and Donald Trump dismissed them as headaches, not to mention how Donald Trump has treated and talked about America's military and military service people, calling them suckers and losers,
Hamas,
has diminished the significance.
We're talking over each other. I apologize.
Well, I would like that we would have a conversation that is grounded in full assessment of the facts, which includes, I think this interview is supposed to be about the choices that your viewers should be presented about this election, and the contrast is important.
Yes, ma'am.
And on the subject of Iran, I am offering what should be an important contrast that is presented for folks to make a decision that they feel.
Who look at what the administration did and say and think differently. Madam Vice President, they're wrapping me very hard here. I hope you got to say what you wanted to say about Donald Trump. There are a lot of things.
There's more to say. I have much more to say.
There are a lot of things that people want to learn about you and your policies, and that's why we invited you here.
I invite everyone to go to KamalaHarris.com, and you will see that I have 80 pages of policies that are quite comprehensive and should be accessible to anyone who would like to read them. And it includes what I intend to do about affordable housing, what I intend to do about small businesses, what I do.
And that's why we invited you here,
our economy,
to see where you were in 2019 and where you are now.
America's military, and ensure we have the most lethal and best fighting world.
Madam Vice President, and they're giving me a hard rap here.
Well, I thank you for the time.
I thank you for the time.
It's good to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Takeaway.
One, I think it is great that she did the interview with Fox, and I think that it was amazing that you were the interviewer. I think that that was an incredible 30 minutes.
Co-anchor of America's
of law and of honoring the hallowed document that our founding fathers signed right here in this great state, the Constitution of the United States. And as a military guy, I've always respected strength in leadership. And Trump is the opposite of that. He's a whiny, weak, small, tiny man who is scared to death. You know, Donald Trump may be running as a Republican, but the truth is he does not share those long-held Republican values of supporting democracy, of standing for the rule of law, and of faithfulness to the Constitution. As a Republican, that saddens me. But what gives me hope is that there is a candidate in this race who does hold those values. You know, I know that Kamala Harris shares my allegiance to the rule of law, to the Constitution, and to democracy. Whatever policies we disagree on pale in comparison to those fundamental matters of principle, of decency, of fidelity to this nation. You know, democracy knows no party. Democracy is a living, breathing ideal that defines us as a nation. It's the bedrock that separates us from tyranny. And when that foundation is fractured, we must stand united to strengthen it. And I, like you, believe that those values are worth defending. And if you think those principles are worth defending, I urge you to make the conservative choice. Vote for our bedrock values and vote for Kamala Harris. God bless you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bob Lang.
And my name is Christina Lang.
Christina and I live on our family farm that's been in my family since 1896. 5 generations have called that place home. We have been Republicans all our lives. We both voted for Donald Trump. I voted for him twice. It made sense. We are Republicans. You vote for the Republican candidate. I should make a note, Christina was ahead of the learning curve. She only voted for him once. I thought he'd fight for people like us, but it's clear Donald Trump doesn't care about helping hardworking people. And he certainly doesn't care about our Commonwealth and our Constitution. He only cares about what's good for him. January 6th was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I watched in horror as what went down. The guy encouraged a violent mob to storm the Capitol, then sat back and did nothing, and attempted to overturn a free and fair election. Just this week, he called for the unleashing of U.S. military on American citizens who he called the enemy within. That is dangerous language. We know that a second Trump term would be much worse than his first, and we deserve better. We deserve a leader who will bring people together and fight for the middle class, not someone who tries to divide us.
We also need someone who actually cares about the American people and who will defend our Constitution. And that's why Bob and I are both voting for Kamala Harris. Never in a million years did either of us think that we'd be standing here supporting a Democrat. But we've had enough. We've had enough. And we've also noticed that Kamala is an amazing candidate in so many ways. But it's time to turn the page on Trump and his chaos and the way he divides us as people in this nation. We've got to move forward. We've got to elect someone who is in this fight for the working class people. And not trying to help her rich friends get richer, or taking revenge on people that have slighted her in any way. We've got to elect someone who will take our Commonwealth forward and not backwards. There's more at stake in this election than any other election in my lifetime. And the choice for us and millions of Republicans across the country is simple. It's Kamala Harris. She's charting a new way forward. Forward where costs are lower for folks like us and you, and where our democracy and freedoms are a priority and are protected.
And now, we are so incredibly honored to introduce our incredible leader.
Please join us in welcoming the next President of the United States, Vice President Kamala Harris.
Pennsylvania. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Bob and Christina, thank you so very much for that introduction and for your friendship. And as I've said to all the friends and leaders on the stage with me, we had a chance to speak ahead of time. I thank you all for everything that you are doing and the courage you are showing. You know, this is an extraordinary climate right now. And I think we all recognize the courage that you are each showing to speak out so publicly and to put, as we are saying, because we truly believe at country over party. So thank you all. And can we please applaud Bob and Christina and all of the folks on the stage, please. Thank you. Thank you. So if you all have a seat, please do sit. Yes. So as I think everyone here knows, we meet in a place that holds a very special meaning for our country. Here on Christmas night, 1776, General George Washington and over 2,000 troops crossed the icy Delaware River in darkness, then marched to Trenton, where they surprised an outpost of enemy soldiers and achieved a major victory in the American Revolution. And after we won the war and achieved our independence, delegates from across the nation gathered not far from here in Philadelphia to write and to sign the Constitution of the United States. And we remember and reflect on what that moment was, knowing that leading up to that work to write, to compose the Constitution of the United States, that work was not easy. The founders often disagreed, often quite passionately. But in the end, the Constitution of the United States laid out the foundations of our democracy, including the rule of law, that there would be checks and balances, that we would have free and fair elections, and a peaceful transfer of power. And these principles and traditions have sustained our nation for over 2 centuries. Sustained because generations of Americans from all backgrounds, from all beliefs, have cherished them, upheld them, and defended them. And now, the baton is in our hands. So I am joined today by over 100 Republican leaders from across Pennsylvania and across our country who are supporting my candidacy for President of the United States. And I am deeply honored to have their support. Some served in state houses, some in the United States Congress, some worked for other Republican presidents and presidential nominees, including Mitt Romney, John McCain, George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, and Ronald Reagan. And some today served in Donald Trump's own administration. We also have with us Republican voters from here in Pennsylvania and beyond, who have been active in their Republican parties for years, who have supported Republican candidates up and down the ticket. Now, I say all that to make an obvious point. In a typical election year, you all being here with me might be a bit surprising, dare I say unusual. But not in this election. Not in this election. Because at stake in this race are the democratic ideals that our founders and generations of Americans before us have fought for. At stake in this election is the Constitution of the United States, its very self. We are here today because we share a core belief that we must put country before party. Indeed, because we chant that with such great pride, because we all know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And at some point in the career of the folks who joined me on stage, one of the other things that we have in common is in our careers, we have each sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And so we know that sacred oath must always be honored and never violated, and that we should expect anyone who seeks the highest office in our land would meet that standard. We here know the Constitution is not a relic from our past, but determines whether we are a country where the people can speak freely and even criticize the president without fear of being thrown in jail or targeted by the military. Where the people can worship as they choose without the government interfering. Where you can vote without fear that your vote will be thrown away. All of this and more depends on whether or not our leaders honor their oath to the Constitution. I have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution 6 times, including as Vice President, as a United States Senator, and as the top law enforcement officer of the largest state in our country. And I have never wavered from upholding that oath. And this is a profound difference between Donald Trump and me. He, who violated the oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and make no mistake, he who, if given the chance, will violate it again. Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. And he refused to accept the will of the people and the results of a free and fair election. He sent a mob, an armed mob, to the United States Capitol, where they violently assaulted police officers, law enforcement officials, and threatened the life of his own vice president. And he refused to engage in the peaceful transfer of power. Were it not for the courage and patriotism of Vice President Pence that day, Donald Trump might have actually succeeded in overturning the will of the American people. Let's reflect on that. And now, Donald Trump is telling us how he intends to use power if he is elected again. He has stated that one of the biggest threats America faces is, quote, the enemy from within. The enemy from within. But know where that language harkens back to. Understand, and let us be clear about what he is saying. He considers any American who doesn't support him or bend to his will to be an enemy to our country. And further, he says that as commander-in-chief, he would use our military to go after them. Honestly, let that sink in. Use of the American military to go after American citizens? And we know who he would target first, because he has targeted them and attacked them before. Journalists whose stories he doesn't like. nonpartisan election officials who refuse to cheat by finding extra votes for him, judges who insist on following the law instead of following him. It is clear Donald Trump is increasingly unstable and unhinged. And he is seeking unchecked power. Consider what his closest advisors have said. His national security advisor, 2 defense secretaries, his former chief of staff, his own vice president, all have warned America Donald Trump is unfit to serve. Or listen to General Milley, Donald Trump's top general. He has called Trump, and I quote, fascist to the core, and said, quote, no one has ever been as dangerous to this country. So think about that. General Milley served in uniform for more than 40 years, commanding American forces around the world. He has confronted some of America's worst enemies. And he is saying, no one has ever been as dangerous to our country as Donald Trump. America must heed this warning, because anyone who tramples on our democratic values, as Donald Trump has, anyone who has called for the, quote, termination of the Constitution of the United States, as Donald Trump has, must never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States. Never again. Never again. And to those who are watching, if you share that view, no matter your party, no matter who you voted for last time, there is a place for you in this campaign. The coalition we have built has room for everyone who is ready to turn the page on the chaos and instability of Donald Trump. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans. And I take that pledge seriously. I take that pledge quite seriously. So as I've mentioned, many of you know, I spent a career as a prosecutor in law enforcement, and I will tell you, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or are you a Democrat? I never asked of anyone who needed help, if anyone who deserved attention, where were they registered and who did they vote for? The only question I ever asked was, are you okay? And that is the kind of president I pledge to you that I will be. That is my pledge to you. Because we have too much to do and too much good work to do to be relegated to requiring each of us to be in some silo, disconnected from each other. There's too much good to be done. And the challenges that we face as a nation require us, if we truly want to create solutions and strengthen our nation, the approach truly requires that we understand we're all in this together. This is so much more than rhetoric or a campaign. It really is about tapping into the spirit of who we are as Americans. Because we are all in this together. We are all in this together. And so I pledge to be a president who actively works to unite us around our highest aspirations. I pledge to you to be a president who is realistic and practical and has common sense, and to always fight for the American people. Unlike Donald Trump, who frankly, as we have seen, cares more about running on problems than fixing problems. I want to fix problems, which means working across the aisle. It requires working across the aisle. It requires embracing good ideas from wherever they come. That is why I have pledged to appoint a Republican in my cabinet. That is why I have pledged to establish a council on bipartisan solutions to recommend to me common sense solutions to some of the most pressing issues facing our country. Because nobody has a corner on the good ideas. They actually come from many places. And one should, especially if they want to be a leader, one should welcome those ideas. And those ideas, which are about, in particular, strengthening the middle class, securing our border, defending our freedoms, and maintaining our leadership in the world. And all of this is to also say that I believe for America to be the world's strongest democracy, we must have a healthy two-party system. Because it is when we have a healthy two-party system that leaders are then required to debate the merits of policy and to work, yes, across the aisle, regularly and routinely to get things done. And I have experienced firsthand how important and rewarding that kind of bipartisan cooperation can be. So I'll tell you, when I was a United States Senator, I served on the Senate Intelligence Committee. It was actually my favorite committee for a number of reasons, but specifically this. There we dealt with some of the most pressing issues affecting national security. There we would talk about hotspots around the world and what we needed to do to focus on keeping America safe and secure. And to do that, we would review classified information, which required us to meet in a secure room. Adam, you know, it's called a SCIF. Okay. When we would go in that room, with all due respect, no cameras were allowed. No press. And we would roll up our sleeves and get to work. I'm telling you, senators of both parties would walk in that room, take off their suit jackets, roll up their sleeves, have a cup of coffee on the table, and we would have real conversations. Real conversations. As Americans. Because we understood that what happened in that room, well, the stakes were so high. And therefore, it could not be, we could not afford to let it be, about whether one was a Democrat or a Republican. The stakes were too high. We were in that room, and it was all about us as Americans, about doing what is in the best interest of the safety and security of our nation. I loved that work. And it was what we have as the theme of today. It was country over party in action. In action. So I know it can be done. And that is the standard of leadership and the aspiration that I have in terms of how we will work when, with your help, I am elected President of the United States. So, thank you. So, we got to get to work. So, let me just say an obvious point. There's a fundamental choice in this election, a very fundamental choice. A choice between the leadership that I pledge to offer to America, leadership that brings folks together, that builds consensus and focuses on making life better for you, with the knowledge that we have so much more in common than what separates us. And on the other hand, the choice of someone who I think we can guarantee will sit in the Oval Office plotting retribution, stew in his own grievances, and think only about himself and not you. So as I have said, our campaign is not a fight against something, it is a fight for something. It is a fight for the fundamental principles upon which we were founded. It is a fight for a new generation of leadership that is optimistic about what we can achieve together. Republicans, Democrats, and independents who want to move past the politics of division and blame and get things done on behalf of the American people. And when it all comes down to it, I know we are all here together this beautiful afternoon because we love our country. We love our country. And we are here because we know the deep privilege and pride that comes with being an American, and the duty that comes along with it. Imperfect though we may be, America is still that shining city upon a hill that inspires people around the world. And I do believe it is one of the highest forms of patriotism to fight for the ideals of our country. So, to people from across Pennsylvania and across our nation, let us together stand up for the rule of law, for our democratic ideals, and for the Constitution of the United States. And in 20 days, we have the power to chart a new way forward, one that is worthy of this magnificent country that we are all blessed to call home. Thank you all. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you all.